The stranger looked at him with a slight smile, and retiring from the window, came out of the hostelry with a slow step, and placed himself before the horse, within 2 paces of D'Artagnan. His quiet manner and ironical expression of his countenance redoubled the mirth of the persons to whom he had been talking, and who still remained at the window. D'Artagnan, seeing him approach, drew his sword a foot out of its scabbard. "This horse is decidedly, or rather has been in his youth, a buttercup," resumed the stranger, continuing the remarks he had begun, and addressing himself to his auditors at the window, without paying the least attention to the exasperation of D'Artagnan, who, however, placed himself between him and them. "It is a color very well known in botany, but till the present time very rare among horses. There are people who laugh at the horse who would not dare laugh at the master," cried the young emulator of the furious Tréville. "I do not often laugh, sir," replied the stranger, "as you may perceive by the expression of my countenance. But nevertheless, I retain the privilege of laughing when I please." "And I," cried D'Artagnan, "will allow no man to laugh when it displeases me." "Indeed, sir," continued the stranger, more calm than ever. "Well, that is perfectly right," and turning on his heel, was about to re-enter the hostelry by the front gate, beneath which D'Artagnan, on arriving, had observed a saddled horse. But D'Artagnan was not of a character to allow a man to escape him thus, who had the insolence to ridicule him. He drew his sword entirely from the scabbard, and following him, crying, "Turn, turn, master joker, lest I strike you behind." "Strike me!" said the other, turning on his heels, and surveying the young man with as much astonishment as contempt. "Why, my good fellow, you must be mad." Then, in a suppressed tone, as if speaking to himself, "This is annoying," he continued. "What a godsend this would be for his Majesty, who is seeking everywhere for brave fellows to recruit for his musketeers." He had scarcely finished when D'Artagnan made such a furious lunge at him that if he had not sprung nimbly backwards, it is probable he would have jested for the last time. The stranger, then perceiving that the matter was beyond raillery, drew his sword, saluted his adversary, and seriously placed himself on guard. But at that moment his 2 auditors, accompanied by the host, fell upon D'Artagnan with sticks, shovels, and tongs. This caused so rapid and complete a diversion from the attack that D'Artagnan's adversary, while the latter turned round to face this shower of blows, sheathed his sword with the same precision, and instead of an actor, which he had nearly been, became a spectator of the fight, a part in which he acquitted himself with his usual impassiveness, muttering nevertheless, "A plague upon these Gascons! Replace him on his orange horse, and let him be gone." "Not before I've killed you, poltroon!" cried D'Artagnan, making the best face possible, and never retreating one step before his 3 assailants, who continued to shower blows upon him. "Another Gasconade!" murmured the gentleman. "By my honor, these Gascons are incorrigible. Keep up the dance, then, since he will have it so. When he is tired, he will perhaps tell us he has had enough of it." But the stranger knew not the headstrong personage that he had to do with. D'Artagnan was not the man ever to cry for quarter. The fight was therefore prolonged some seconds, but at length D'Artagnan dropped his sword, which was broken in 2 pieces by the blow of a stick. Another blow, full upon his forehead at the same moment, brought him to the ground, covered with blood and almost fainting. It was at this moment the people came flocking to the scene of action from all sides. The host, fearful of consequences, with the help of his servants, carried the wounded man into the kitchen, where some trifling attentions were bestowed upon him. As to the gentleman, he resumed his place at the window, and surveyed the crowd with a certain impatience, evidently annoyed at their remaining undispersed. "Well, how is it with this madman?" exclaimed he, turning round as the noise of the door announced the entrance of the host, who came in to inquire if he was unhurt. Your Excellency is safe and sound?" asked the host. "Oh, yes, perfectly safe and sound, my good host. And I wish to know what has become of our young man." "He is better," said the host. "He fainted quite away." "Indeed," said the gentleman. "But before he fainted he collected all his strength to challenge you, and to defy you while challenging you." "Why, this fellow must be a devil in person," cried the stranger. "Oh, no, your Excellency, he is not a devil," replied the host, with a grin of contempt. "For during his fainting we rummaged his valise and found nothing but a clean shirt and 11 crowns, which, however, did not prevent him saying as he was fainting, that if such a thing had happened in Paris you would have had to repent of it at a later period." Then said the stranger coolly, "He must be some prince in disguise." "I have told you this, good sir," resumed the host, "in order that you may be on your guard." "Did he name no one in his passion?" "Yes. He struck his pocket and said, 'We shall see what Monsieur de Treville will think of the insult offered to his protégé.'" "Monsieur de Treville," said the stranger, becoming attentive. He put his hand upon his pocket while pronouncing the name of Monsieur de Treville. "Now, my dear host, while your young man was insensible, you did not fail, I am quite sure, to ascertain what the pocket contained. What was there in it?" "A letter addressed to Monsieur de Treville, captain of the Musketeers." "Indeed?" "Exactly as I have the honor to tell your Excellency." The host, who was not endowed with a great propensity, did not observe the expression which his words had given the physiognomy of the stranger. The latter rose from the front of the window, upon the sill of which he had leaned with his elbow, and knitted his brow like a man disquieted. "The devil," murmured he between his teeth, "can Treville have set this gascon upon me? He is very young, but a sword thrust is a sword thrust, whatever the age of him who gives it, and a youth is less to be suspected than an older man." And the stranger fell into a reverie which lasted some minutes. A weak obstacle is sometimes sufficient to overthrow a great design. "Host," said he, "could you not contrive to get rid of this frantic boy for me? In conscience I cannot kill him, and yet," added he, with a coldly menacing expression, "he annoys me. Where is he?" "In my wife's chamber, on the first flight, where they are dressing his wounds." "His things and his bag are with him? Has he taken off his doublet?" "On the contrary, everything is in the kitchen. But if he annoys you, this young fool—" "To be sure he does. He causes a disturbance in your hostelry, which respectable people cannot put up with. Go, make out my bill and notify my servant." "What, monsieur will leave so soon?" "You know that very well, as I gave the order to saddle my horse. Have they not obeyed me?" "It is done, your Excellency. It is done, as your Excellency may have observed. Your horse is in the great gateway, ready saddled for your departure." "That is well. Do as I have directed you, then." "What the devil," said the host to himself, "can he be afraid of this boy?" But an imperious glance from the stranger stopped him short. He bowed humbly and retired. "It is not necessary for milady to be seen by this fellow," continued the stranger. "She will soon pass. She is already late. I had better get on horseback and go and meet her. I should like, however, to know what this letter addressed to Treville contains." And the stranger, muttering to himself, directed his steps towards the kitchen. In the meantime, the host, who entertained no doubt that it was the presence of the young man that drove the stranger from his hostelry, reascended to his wife's chamber and found D'Artagnan just recovering his senses. Giving him to understand that the police would deal with him pretty severely for having sought a quarrel with a great lord, in the opinion of the host, the stranger to be nothing less than a great lord, he insisted that notwithstanding his weakness, D'Artagnan should get up and depart as quickly as possible. D'Artagnan, half stupefied, without his doublet, and with his head bound up in a linen cloth, arose then, and, urged by the host, began to descend the stairs. But on arriving at the kitchen, the first thing he saw was his antagonist, talking calmly at the steps of a heavy carriage, drawn by 2 Norman horses. His interlocutor, whose head appeared through the carriage window, was a woman, of from 20 to 22 years. We've already observed with what rapidity D'Artagnan seized the expression of a countenance. He perceived then at a glance that this woman was young and beautiful, and her style of beauty struck him more forcibly for its being totally different from that of the southern countries in which D'Artagnan had hitherto resided. She was pale and fair, with long curls falling in profusion over her shoulders, with large blue languishing eyes, rosy lips, and hands of alabaster. She was talking with great animation with the stranger. "His Eminence then orders me," said the lady, "to return instantly to England, and to inform him as soon as the Duke leaves London." "And as to my other instructions?" asked the fair traveller. "They are contained in this box, which you are not to open until you are on the other side of the Channel." "Very well. And you, what will you do?" I return to Paris." "What, without chastising this insolent boy?" asked the lady. The stranger was about to reply, but at the moment he opened his mouth, D'Artagnan, who had heard all, precipitated himself over the threshold of the door. This insolent boy chastises others," cried he, "and I hope that this time he whom he ought to chastise will not escape him as before." "Will not escape him," replied the stranger, knitting his brow. "No, before a woman you would not dare fly, I presume." "Remember," said Milady, seeing the stranger lay his hand on his sword, "the least delay may ruin everything." "You are right," cried the gentleman. "Begone then on your part, and I will depart as quickly on mine." And bowing to the lady, sprang into his saddle, while her coachman applied his whip vigorously to the horses. The interlocutors thus separated, taking opposite directions at full gallop. "Pay him, booby!" cried the stranger to his servant, without checking the speed of his horse, and the man, after throwing 2 or 3 silver pieces at the foot of mine host, galloped after his master. "Base coward! False gentleman!" cried D'Artagnan, springing forward in his turn after the servant. But his wound had rendered him too weak to support such an exertion. Scarcely had he gone 10 steps when his ears began to tingle, a faintness seized him, and a cloud of blood passed over his eyes, and he fell in the middle of the street, crying still, "Coward, coward, coward!" "He is a coward indeed," grumbled the host, drawing near to D'Artagnan, and endeavoring by this little flattery to make up matters with the young man, as the heron of the fable did to the snail that he had despised the evening before. "Yes, a base coward," murmured D'Artagnan, "but she was very beautiful." "What she?" demanded the host. "The lady," faltered D'Artagnan, and fainted a second time. "Ah, it's all one," said the host. "I have lost 2 customers, but this one remains, of whom I am pretty certain for some days to come. There will be 11 crowns gained." It is to be remembered that 11 crowns was just the sum that remained in D'Artagnan's purse. The host had reckoned upon 11 days of confinement at a crown a day, but he had reckoned without his guest. On the following morning, at 5 o'clock, D'Artagnan rose, and descending to the kitchen without help, asked, among other ingredients, the list of which he had not come down to us, for some oil, some wine, and some rosemary, and with his mother's recipe in his hand, he composed a balsam, with which he anointed his numerous wounds, replacing his bandages himself, and positively refusing the assistance of any doctor. D'Artagnan walked about that same evening, and was almost cured by the morrow. And when the time came to pay for his rosemary, this oil, and the wine, the only expense the master had incurred, as he had preserved a strict abstinence, while on the contrary the yellow horse, by the account of the hostler at least, had eaten 3 times as much as a horse his size could reasonably have supposed to have done. D'Artagnan found nothing in his pocket but a little old velvet purse with 11 crowns it contained, for, as the letter addressed to Monsieur de Treville, it had disappeared. The young man commenced his search for the letter with the greatest patience, turning out his pockets of all kinds over and over again, rummaging and re-rummaging in his valise, opening and reopening his purse.